Hey everybody, this is Darren and you're watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today we're going to talk about the new movie, Upgrade. It's going to be a brief review just to tell you what I thought about it. And then we're going to get into some spoilers that are going to involve some of the, just greater details on what the movie means. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how realistic the movie is and maybe what the future of I don't want to spoil anything. I will give you a big notice before I give any spoilers though. I liked this movie a lot. It is very different, it feels fresh, but it also feels very familiar. It almost feels kind of like a John Carpenter movie. Now, in terms of the way it looks and the exact way it feels, it's fairly unique unto itself. It reminded me of a couple of things, and we'll get into what those were. But I kept thinking about the movie, and it really reminded me of John Carpenter in a lot of ways. With the themes, it gets kind of gory, and it really surprised me with it at times, even though it's not a gore fest. It's sci-fi, it's almost horror, it just flirts with all these different genres, and it's essentially a genre bender of a movie. And it just, days later, I was listening to actually some the Lost Tracks, John Carpenter's Lost Tracks, which I highly recommend if you've never heard it. But this movie just feels like a fresh take, like John Carpenter reborn. So for that, I really loved it. I feel like that's a good way to describe it. If you've seen the trailer for this, I was sold immediately because we're essentially dealing with a guy. He gets in an accident, he's a paraplegic, and he gets a upgrade. He gets a computer chip implanted into the back of his neck, and it allows him to have special abilities. I'll leave it at that for the spoiler-free section. And the trailer showed this really cool fight sequence where this computer chip is essentially controlling his body. The reason I was so sold on that concept is because we've seen the guy who doesn't know that he can fight and then suddenly can fight. Think Bourne Identity. We've seen that in various iterations over time, and it's interesting enough, but then this has the twist of this guy is completely not in control of his body. He's along for the ride, and it looks funny, but the body motions look funny, but it also looked really cool and intense. While watching it, I felt like the movie was sort of a mixture between John Wick and Ex Machina. It had themes similar to both, and just because it had that different twist on it, I'm like, okay, here's something that's familiar with a new twist. I'm in, I'm sold. Even if the movie's not good, I'm gonna at least be interested to see how that plays out, and it turns out the movie's really good. The production design is great. It looks really cool. I could tell it was on a fairly low budget for this type of sci-fi action movie that requires a lot of special effects and, sets and stuff, but they made very good use of the low budget. I was aware just because I watch a lot of movies, but it wasn't overly obvious, so they did a good job. I noticed a couple little tricks that I thought were really slick, so that was cool. The cast, you're almost not going to recognize anybody. At the very least, you'll recognize a couple, but there's no names in this. There's no big names, which I absolutely love. I always want to see a movie like this, not just because it can showcase new actors, but because even though I like actors like Bruce Willis, or he's just at the top of mind, whenever he's in a movie, I'm very aware that I'm watching Bruce Willis. With this, I don't know who these people are. I'm not that familiar with them, and it's not distracting me from the movie. Now, the main character, you'll recognize him from movies like The Invitation. If you haven't seen that on Netflix, I highly recommend it. He had a significant, albeit small and short-lived role in Prometheus, and you'll recognize that he had another short-lived role as the Shocker in Spider-Man Homecoming. And then the cop, the detective in the story, you might recognize her. She actually played the housekeeper, I guess that's the best word for it, but the housekeeper in last year's Get Out. And speaking of Get Out, there was a lot of buzz. That was a surprise kind of genre bender movie. Upgrade seems to be shaping up to be similar. Now, Upgrade doesn't deal with, racial tensions or anything too important like that, but it is fun, it's exciting, it's shocking. There was a moment, I saw it in a fairly crowded theater. There was a moment where I literally, and I don't shout out in movies. In fact, I try to be very quiet. I don't answer text, nothing. But there was one moment where I literally just went, whoa! I mean, it shocked me. Some of you, You might know what that moment was because you might have been a little shocked as well. I cannot recommend this movie enough. If you like sci-fi horror, do not expect this to be a horror movie, but it will appeal to horror fans. I'll also say this movie had a very good menacing bad guy. You don't really see him that often, but he had an interesting look to him. He had kind of a real, shirt tucked in real tight, little mustache. Like he had kind of an odd look to him, and I just hair parted. Like he was very sort of clean cut, almost, I don't know. He was a very interesting look for him, and I really liked the way he looked. But he was also just really menacing, even though he's on screen all of about 6 minutes, maybe more. It's less than 10 that he's actually on screen. He really stood out. I don't think I've ever seen him before unless he's just a really good chameleon. And then as far as the bad guy goes, this movie also had some really good twists. There was one that I kind of saw coming from a mile away, but then another that I absolutely did not see coming, and that's fantastic. In the spoiler section, which we're just about to jump into, I'm going to talk more about what the meaning of the twist was, things like that. But I can't recommend this movie enough. It is worth a trip to the theater, and it's absolutely worth a rental when it comes out, so I highly, highly recommend it. I'm going to go ahead and jump into spoilers because I want to talk about one of the themes of the movie, and I really don't want to spoil anything. I think I've sold it enough. If you want to hang with me for this next section, it's not going to ruin the movie, but then I'll give you a little heads up again before I get into real heavy spoilers. So because this movie does deal with artificial intelligence, which the trailers didn't necessarily tell me that it was 100% artificial intelligence, but it's close enough, so it's not a huge spoiler. But you're dealing with artificial intelligence, and the thing that's so interesting about artificial intelligence is we don't know what's going to happen. Something that scientists do talk about and philosophers is that we potentially are 5 years away from artificial intelligence, like true conscious AI. Could be 50 years, it could be 500 years. And I know that sounds like, well, nobody knows. It's because some people feel like they're very, very close, and then others say, no, it's too complicated, we're way too far out. So we don't know when it's going to happen, but without a shred of doubt, there are people in various developed countries, there are scientists, teams of scientists trying to crack the code on AI. The scary part about that is, once it's active, we don't know what's going to happen. Now, logically, we could put it in a box. In this movie, it's confined to a computer chip, but we don't know what's going to happen once it gets smarter. And the problem that philosophers are having with AI, including neuroscientists like Sam Harris, is the concept is that there's no time, like time is not the same to a computer as it would be to me or you. So what a human brain might take 1,000 years to learn, or let's just speak in real terms, what a human brain might take 10 years to learn, a AI computer could maybe take a week to learn. And then what a human brain could take 100 years to learn, a computer might only take a month to learn. So that's kind of the scary part, is it's going to just become exponentially more intelligent than we are, and that's pretty frightening. And then we're going to jump into some major spoilers now, so go ahead and bail, watch the movie, come back, watch the rest of this, because I'm going to dive real deep into what this movie means. But essentially what we see play out as we get later down into the twist of this movie, the big twist, so I'm telling you, spoilers, don't watch this, is this computer chip, this AI, essentially, it's confined to its interface, which is a computer chip, and it seemed like it was probably tapped into the overall, like, the house of the billionaire, but it's trapped. It can't get out. It can access information, but it ultimately decides it wants to be human, and then figures out how to manipulate everything fairly quickly, I think. So we're going to talk about that too. It figures out how to get inside a human, and then is able to manipulate that human into allowing it to become independent. So a very interesting take on how an AI would get out of a box. In reality, I don't think it would go that route. I think it would think of something that a human would never think of. I don't think it would think of becoming human. I think it would do something more terrifying than that, to be honest. Something that we can't fathom would be the real fear. But with this, I thought the twist got me. It really did. Now, I predicted that Blondie was going to be the bad guy all along. And not just because he was kind of brooding, but that's just a kind of it's a regular beat in movies like this, and I just sort of saw it coming. But the brilliant thing about the writing on this is it serviced that to me, and then completely subverted it, and then you find out that Stim is the real villain here, and not only is Stim the villain, but it wins in the end, which I thought was great for a couple of reasons. One, the detective dies, but our hero, our anti-hero, our main character, doesn't technically do it. His body does. I thought that was brilliant. And then, really, when you think about it, because of what you're dealing with, this was the only real outcome for this story. Like, yeah, somebody could have shot him first, but the police officer was not going to shoot him under those circumstances. And I don't know. I feel like it was a really good way for it to play out. And I was actually kind of disappointed a little bit at first, because I'm like, oh, and I felt like I want to see a sequel to this movie. And I'm like, oh, they erased it. We can't have a sequel. We totally can. Stim is in his body. That actor is now the bad guy, unless they do something else, and that actor is a bad guy, and now you can bring somebody else in, and now they have this like vigilante, this rogue AI system in a fairly capable body that can basically go do whatever it wants to do. And we don't know what it wants to do. That's another thing I find really interesting, is we learned what it wanted to do to get free and become human. So that was its whole agenda, but we have no information was given to us on what its agenda is beyond achieving that. All we see is it got what it wanted. Now we have no idea where it wants to go, what it wants to do. Does it just want to be human? Does it want to conquer? What does it want? So that's where the sequel would go. Super excited for that. And if you really think about the way this movie played out, it's very, very similar to The Matrix, but instead of machines, which are run by computers, but it's the AI basically takes over the human body, uses it as a host, and still puts the brain in a dream state, just like the Matrix. So I thought that was brilliant. So if Stim is somehow able to replicate, which it totally could do, like he could just go somewhere, go to a lab somewhere somehow and create more Stims and somehow implant them in other people. It could essentially build an army, possibly without anybody noticing, based on some of the actions it was able to take by like hiding from the drones. I don't know, is Stim going to be able to take over these armies of police drones that are in the sky? There's so much potential with it, but that's what's exciting about this. I really, really dig that this director, even though he wrote Saw and sort of maybe exhausted that concept, has jumped on to something completely new and different. I thought it was a brilliant way to go. So I'm real curious, what did you think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. I will read them. I will sort of talk to you back and forth a little bit. If you'd like to support the channel, you like content like this, you can do so a number of ways, but definitely subscribe. I put 5 videos out every single week, and be sure to click the bell icon, because subscribing without it on YouTube is useless now. But you can also support me on Patreon. I've got a t-shirt shop. Links for all of that stuff is in the description below, but I will keep making videos like this as long as you keep watching them. But thanks for watching this one, and you will see me next time.